And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 41. And we are starting off this week with Kill Switch. Very interesting card. I actually had a guy in the comments mention what I think of this card, and as it happens, we're reaching that point in the alphabet, so I'm going to talk about it. 3 mana artifact. You can pay 2 and tap all other artifacts. They don't untap during their controller's untap steps for as long as Kill Switch remains tapped. Very interesting card. So you can tap this on your turn. All of your opponent's artifacts are now going to tap, and then on their turn, obviously they're not gonna untap because your kill switch is still tapped. So seems really good if you want to be hating on artifacts. I think mostly it's the mana rocks you're going to be hating on here. Obviously there's a lot of artifacts that when you tap them down, not going to do anything, like an equipment, for example. Mana rocks, obviously you won't be able to use. The downside here is you're not going to be able to use them yourself, right? So at the beginning of your untap, when everything goes to untap, your kill switch is still tapped. So your artifacts, they're not going to untap, right? At the beginning of your untap, your kill switch will untap, but nothing else will. Right? So you got to be careful with that. This goes in a deck where you probably don't want to have a lot of artifacts. Also, though, don't forget, treasure tokens have to tap in order for you to use them, right? Same with those new blood tokens. They all have to tap before you can sacrifice them. So we all know those tokens have been going absolutely bananas in the format over the last year. This is a way that you can lock them all down, right? You can tap down all those treasure tokens that your opponent just made with their Dockside Extortionist, and then they just won't be able to use them. And then you can keep doing that every single turn, right? So it can be really good there as well. Just make sure that when you activate your kill switch, you say kill switch engage. Am I right? But anyway, moving on to number 2 this week is Krosan Beast. 3 and a green. Squirrel Beast. 1/1. So right out of the gate, we have a squirrel and a beast. So it's a card that can fit in a squirrel deck, right? There's not a lot of actual squirrels out there. Mostly you're dealing with tokens whenever you make a squirrel deck. This is an actual creature. That's a squirrel, also a beast. So fits in that beast tribal deck as well, and has threshold. If you have at least 7 cards in your graveyard, Krosan Beast gets +7/+7. Wow, that's big. So it's an 8/8. If you got 7 or more cards in your graveyard, man, an 8/8 for 4 mana is pretty good, even in Commander. And I think in a squirrel deck, you probably want to definitely throw this in there, maybe in a beast deck as well, or maybe in just a graveyard deck, right? In a Sidisi deck where I'm filling my graveyard really, really quickly. A 4 mana 8/8, vanilla creatures aren't fantastic in Commander, but 8/8 creature for 4 mana seems pretty darn good. Coming in at number 3, Kindle the Carnage, and this is just such a funny card. I just had to give it a mention. I've never seen this before. I'm not sure how, because I bought lots of Dissension back in the day. Never saw this card though. This is the first time I've seen it. 1 red sorcery. Discard a card at random. If you do, Kindle the Carnage deals damage equal to the card's mana value to each creature. You may repeat this process any number of times. And of course, any card that says you may do this any number of times should always get a little bit of consideration, because that's something that can really get out of hand fast. I was thinking right away, okay, well, it deals damage to creatures, so maybe this could go in a Stuffy Doll deck, because you can deal a whole bunch of damage to all the other creatures and then also hit your Stuffy Doll, which is then going to hit a player. Maybe this goes in that Grozoth idea I had from my 10 deck ideas video, where you're going to fill your hand with a whole bunch of 9 mana value cards, and you're just going to pitch them all to this. Again, it's going to kill all the creatures, not going to do a whole lot else unless, again, you have that Stuffy Doll effect. But it's interesting to give it consideration there. It's just a really weird, unique board wipe. Also can be good in that Hazoret deck I made, right? Where you actually want your hand to be empty. Maybe there's a deck out there where you want your hand to be empty. This can be good there as well. Just a 3 mana board wipe that's going to kill every creature in play. And then on top of that, you're emptying your hand because you want to, right? Maybe you're in a discard theme where you want to be discarding cards. So it can work great there as well. Another card that works great in any deck where you want to be keeping your hand empty is Kyron Archive. 3 mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile the top card of your library face down. And then then at any time you can pay 5 mana and discard your hand and sacrifice Kyron Archive. Put all cards exiled with Kyron Archive into owner's hand. So this card really probably doesn't seem like much, but I really think it can go in a lot of decks. So first of all, I put this card in my Lelia deck because obviously you want to be exiling cards from the top of your library. Again, in the Hazoret deck, I put this as well because you want to be emptying your hand, and then this way you can refill it, right? So this is a great inclusion there where, yes, I have an empty hand so I can attack block with my commander, but then I can sacrifice this, fill my hand, so then I have stuff to discard with my commander's ability. Also, the important thing to note here is you're not drawing any cards here. That's really, really important. So in a Marilyn of the Mornsong deck where you're not allowed to draw cards, no one's allowed to draw cards, this gets around this, right? It exiles the top card of your library, and then you're going to discard your hand and put all the cards into your hand. There's no drawing involved there, so this gets around that. It gets around any effect that doesn't allow drawing. Also is an interesting include in an Eruth deck. The new commander from Innistrad, Crimson Vow, again, gets around it. Whenever you would draw a card, you exile the top 2 cards out of your library instead. This works there as well because it gets around that. But other than all of that, I think this is actually just a good card draw card, right? In a mono white deck or a mono red deck or any deck where you can't draw very well. 3 mana, I throw this down. It's just going to exile a card on my upkeep every turn. It doesn't require any mana, doesn't require me to do anything. As long as you're not exiling cards that you really care a lot about, right? You're just exiling random cards. You're not exiling your win con or anything like that. If an opponent happens to destroy this before you use it, oh well, you're not really out anything. But later in the game, now I have an empty hand because I'm in a deck that doesn't draw cards very well. I can pay 5 mana and I can do it at instant speed on my opponent's end step, refill my hand with all the stuff that I've been exiling with this for the entire game. So I think it's really good there as well. Coming in at number 5, Kukemsa Pirates. This is a really funny one from back in the day again. 3 and a blue, human pirate 2/2. So it's a pirate. That's really important for all those people out there playing those blue pirate tribal decks. Might want to give this consideration. I think it's got a really interesting ability, very thematic ability too, which I really like. When Kukemsa Pirates attacks and isn't blocked, you may gain control of target artifact defending player controls. If you do, it assigns no combat damage this turn. So really funny card to put in a deck. I mean, it's got to be attacking and unblocked, so it fits really good in that Sidar Kondo deck. If you have a Sidar deck that has blue in it, it's a good fit there, obviously, because it's going to be hard to block. Fits in a pirate theme as well. Making this unblockable is going to be great, but you can also just wait till your opponent doesn't have blockers and just sneak in and steal their Soul Ring. That works as well. Just a really fun card in a commander game, I think. Next up, Kasuri Gamma, 3 mana equipment. Has equip 3, and equipped creature gets pay 2. This creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So a pumpable effect on the equipped creature. That's okay. It's not an ability that I've ever used. I have this in a couple of decks and I've never actually used that. The ability you really want is when a equipped creature deals damage to a blocking creature, Kasuri Gamma deals that much damage to each other creature defending player controls. That's fantastic. So this goes in any deck where you want to be getting in for damage with your commander because you're discouraging your opponents from blocking it, right? If your opponents block your commander, now their entire team is going to take that much damage. Also, you want to put this in a deck where you're encouraging blocking, right? So maybe a card to your Doomscourge deck, this will work. My Gorm Aldrak deck I made where I'm forcing blocks is going to work great as well. The Lord Konda deck that I made is a great fit because I'm forcing blocks there. Now he's going to become an 8/8 and deal 8 damage to their entire team. A Neath deck, obviously, where you're forcing blocks, but also with any of those Archer commanders, right? There's a few Archer commanders like Brigid, like Catti-Brie that are dealing damage to blocking creatures. There's nothing on this that says that it has to be blocked by that creature. It just says deals damage to blocking creatures. So you can put this on your Catti-Brie or your Brigid or any of those Archer commanders, and they're going to be dealing damage to blocking creatures with their ability and then dealing that damage to each other creature defending player controls. So I think it's a fantastic fit in those decks as well. Coming in at number 7, Last Ditch Effort. 1 red mana instant. Sacrifice any number of creatures. Last Ditch Effort deals that much damage to any target. This card, I actually thought, when I saw it, I was like, like, oh, well, I've seen this in Commander game before. It goes in a Krenko deck, right? Sort of that finishing blow for your Krenko or any Goblin theme. I get in for damage, and then after I've dealt damage, 1 mana, I sacrifice my whole team and deal the guy 10 damage as a finishing blow. I thought this was a card that is already a popular card in the format, isn't it? Not so much. I looked it up on EDHREC. It's only in 1,000 decks on there, which is shocking to me. Doesn't have to be the finishing blow. It can just be someone's about to board wipe. This is 1 red mana. So if I have this in my hand and I'm in any deck that is red, that is creature heavy, it's just a way to get some value out of your team being wiped out anyway, right? Someone cast a Wrath of God, I just pay 1 red mana, sacrifice my whole team, and punch them in the face for their trouble. Why not get some value out of your creatures that are going to die anyway? Only 1 mana. Coming in at number 8, Larceny. 3 black enchantment. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. Really great card. I mean, you can play this in a discard theme if you want your opponents to be discarding cards, but of course, your opponent's discarding cards is always going to be a good thing in any theme. I saw this card right after I did a deck tech for my patron for an Ink Eyes Servant of Oni deck, and I thought, you know, you're going to be getting in for damage a lot with that commander and with some of the other ninjas in the deck. What are some advantages we can get out of that? You know, there's a lot of great ones in blue, there's a lot of great ones in green, not a lot of great ones in black. This is one of them, right? This is one of those cards where if you're in a black deck where you're getting in for damage all the time, this is a big advantage that you can give yourself, making your opponents discard their hand, right? Coming in at number 9, Latinas Legacy. And this is a really interesting one. Again, another card that I almost passed by, and then I started to think about it and I'm like, man, this card is actually really, really good. 1 in a blue instant, shuffle a card from your hand into your library. If you do, draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this card really doesn't seem like much. It seems like a mediocre draw spell, but it's doing so much more than that because it's doing it in a very unique way. So first of all, you're shuffling a card from your hand into your library, and as a lot of people know, a lot of times you want cards in your library. I just, again, made a deck tech for one of my patrons that was an Unspeakable deck. And Unspeakable wasn't the commander, that was the hidden commander. And for those who don't know, you can use Reach Through Mist and Peer Through Depths and Sift Through Sands, and once you cast all those cards, you go get the Unspeakable out of your library and stick it in play. But what if you draw the Unspeakable, right? If it's in your hand, you won't be able to do that. Now it's stuck in your hand. It has to be in your library, and there's a lot of effects like that where you want them in your library rather than your hand. And Lord Farquaad, if you're watching this video, buddy, and I know you probably are, Latinas Legacy probably wants to go in your Unspeakable deck. So it's great that way, where I just have a card in my hand and I want to shuffle it into my library because I'd rather have it in my library than in my hand. However, there's a lot more going on here. I also think this card is fantastic with wheel effects. So your opponent is going to cast a wheel. You have a card in your hand. Again, it's your win con or something you really want. In my Commander Staples I Don't Play video, I talked about how I don't really like wheels and I don't play them. And a lot of people said on the comments of that video, wheels are great because your opponent tutors for their win con and you make them discard it. That is true. This is a way to protect that. Your opponent wheels, and in response, you cast this, shuffle that win con back into your library so you can go get it later. The added bonus here is you draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, right? So what's going to happen is your opponent wheels, you draw a fresh hand, 7 cards, and then on the next upkeep, you'll draw 2 additional cards. So now you have 9 cards in hand. You're going to have 2 more cards than everybody else. And so for that reason, it can be even good in a deck where you want to be wheeling, right? If you're in a wheelie deck, now you can cast this in response to your own wheel, and you can shuffle that card. Again, a card in your hand that you don't want to discard. You want to tuck it back in your library so you can draw it maybe later or tutor for it later. And again, you're going to fill your hand with 7 cards, and then on the next person's turn, you're going to draw 2 additional cards. So I think it's extra good there, right? That delayed draw effect is actually a huge bonus for wheel effects. Really, really great card that I think could probably go in almost any deck. And finally today, Last Laugh. Man, this is a crazy card. 2 black enchantment. Whenever a permanent other than Last Laugh is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, any permanent, is put into the graveyard from the battlefield. Last Laugh deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. And when there are no creatures on the battlefield, sacrifice Last Laugh. Man, this card is nuts. I mean, you really can go crazy with this. You can just throw this in your deck, and if you want to be hating on creatures, I think, someone sacks a fetch land, this is going to deal 1 damage to each creature, and it's going to kill a whole bunch of creatures, right? So maybe if you're in that theme, like a Griswold deck where, you know, there's going to be lots of token creatures around that you want to be dying, it'll fit there. Your Griswold's going to keep getting bigger and bigger, so it'll be okay, right? Slaughter Specialist is another one there where I'm going to give my opponents a bunch of little creatures. When they die, my Slaughter Specialist keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so it's going to escape dying to Last Laugh. So it can be really great in a deck there where you just want lots of stuff to be dying all the time, because this is just constantly going to be dealing damage to everyone's creatures, right? Again, another deck tech that I did for a patron of mine. This is the third one I'm talking about in this video. I did a Lurrus deck, but again, it was a hidden commander deck, and the hidden commander there was High Priest of Penance. And this is a combo that I came up with, and this is the reason I made him this deck. He wanted a Lurrus deck, but something a little more unique, and I had come up with this idea. I thought it fit great with Lurrus because, of course, High Priest is a 2-mana card that you can cast from your graveyard with your Lurrus. And of course, whenever High Priest of Penance is dealt damage, you may destroy target non-land permanent. And I realized that this combos fantastically with Last Laugh. So of course, in that deck, you know, if you want to take advantage of your High Priest, and of course the deck is built around High Priest, so we're going to be doing that in that deck, you put a Darksteel Plate on your High Priest so that it doesn't die. Obviously, it's not going to die from damage, but it's still going to take the damage. So what happens is, as soon as something goes to the graveyard, any permanent, again, someone sacks a fetch land, Last Laugh is going to deal 1 damage to each creature, and it's going to deal 1 damage to your High Priest, which will then trigger your High Priest, and you will be able to destroy a non-land permanent. And when you do, it's gonna go to the graveyard and trigger your Last Laugh again. And repeat the process, right? You see where this is going here. As long as you have a way to keep your High Priest of Penance from dying, but still taking damage, and there's a lot of ways to do that, this will just destroy everything on the board. Of course, you can stop at any time. This is a may. You may destroy target non-land permanent. So obviously, once you've destroyed everything of your opponents, you're going to leave your own stuff alone and stop the process. But this combo just becomes destroy all of your opponent's non-land permanents. And of course, it doesn't go away after that, right? You still have your Last Laugh. You still have your High Priest of Penance. So your opponents have to break up this combo basically before they can cast any non-land permanents. Really fantastic combo. But in general, just a really, really crazy, awesome card in a commander game, I think. Again, if you're hating on creatures, I think it's a good fit. Or if you want to be killing your opponent's creatures all the time, I think just a really, really powerful card in a commander game. But that is it for this week. That's 10 more cards you should be putting in your commander decks. Maybe one of my favorite episodes I've ever done, actually. There's a lot of great cards in this episode. And if you are thinking of purchasing any of the cards from this episode, check out my TCG Player link. It's in the description below. It helps support the channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.